Now, the need to work collaboratively is more relevant than ever, and the skills to do this are more critical than they have ever been. In recent months, we've heard that there appears to be a real appetite for newfound collaborations to continue as teams look to the future. And one tool that might be of use to support everyone in making this a reality is the Skills for Collaborative Change framework, which is on the screen at the minute. It was developed by Q and Nesta and looks at the skills and attitudes needed for collaborative change. It comprises of 3 overall skills: learn by doing, initiate change, and bringing people together. And we use this framework throughout the series as we explore each of those sections. So if we look at the overall workshops series, from this framework, we have shaped a series of 6 workshops, and you can see where we are today. The series has been shaped by your needs, and in workshop 1, you told us what was of interest to you. And from your poll results, the series will follow those themes within the Skills for Collaborative Change framework. Each session is designed as a standalone session, so you've got that ability to dip in and out, but we'd encourage you to come to as many as possible. So in our last session, we had this quote, and it was a reflection from Nigel, who was a speaker with lived experience in workshop 2. And it was an insight that resonated with many of us. In workshop 2, we surfaced that taking time to cultivate relationships is fundamental, a precursor that paves the way for co-creation. So as you can see, the focus of today's workshop is co-create. And to begin, we'd like to run a quick poll with the following question. So you can either use Slido or you can pop your answers in the chat. If you're using Slido, you need to use the QR code on the screen. What does co-creation mean to you? Thanks, Nia, kicking us off. Collaboration and communication. Fundamental part of communication. Involving all and sharing power. Creating together. Partners and our population. Everyone is an expert, lived experience is valued. There's some fantastic elements being drawn together, and I think you'll hear some of these through the sessions today and definitely in the discussions later, valuing what each person brings. That's lovely. Thank you for your contributions on that. And we'll be capturing all these and building these into our workshop report as well. That's fantastic. So to move us into the concept of co-creation, we've got quite a few of the team here with us today. So as facilitators, you've got myself, Dominic Bird, Head of Capacity and Capability with Improvement Cymru, and Mandy from the QLab Cymru team. For logistics, we've got Sue and Emma, and our case example contributors, we've got Rebecca, Vicky and Kerry, and unfortunately Zoe couldn't be with us today. So we're going to run through some of the principles of how we're going to learn together before we hear from our case example contributors. So first off, we'll start with collaborative learning. These are interactive sessions, and we've designed the activities to support you to have useful conversations by learning together through collaborative and peer learning. Secondly, we want this to be a safe and supportive space for people to share openly with each other, recognizing that this is a very difficult time for many of us. Thirdly, each session in the series is shaped by the feedback that we receive from you. And lastly, we aim to give you the space and time to process your thoughts in breakout rooms, as well as some time at the end for individual reflection and consideration of the learning and actions you may wish to take forward. So before we hear from our case contributors, we're going to take a minute to reflect and ask ourselves another question. So again, you can use Slido or pop into the chat. Using up to 3 words, how do you feel when you hear the term co-creation? Well, that's fantastic. First one in is excited. That's brilliant. Honored. Excellent. Apprehensive and some challenged, unsure as it's new. And I think that there's always that, that balance. And we hope that today's session will help you explore some of those and give you some support in how to move more into a co-creation space. Energized and excited, part of co-production. Skeptical or wary as well as positive. And it's great to have that balance in the room with us today. And the way forward, that's fantastic. Please carry on if you're in the midst of popping your 3 words either into the chat or into Slido. And it would be great to explore some of these aspects in the breakout rooms in your discussions later as well. So we're using a model from Nesta. We're going to approach our learning together as shown on this slide. And the workshop design aims to thread these 4 principles through every aspect of today, the whole series, and also beyond. So start off with learning with and from peers. There'll be opportunities to hear from colleagues who have a hands-on experience in doing improvement as they share their case examples of their improvement work and change that has worked under each of the topics through the series. Secondly, we will have opportunities for sharing experiences and discussions with others in breakout rooms, as well as time and space for self-reflection. Thirdly, where we're learning for action, we'll look to be inspired by each other to do things in new ways, to create impact by formulating actionable goals, considering how we're going to act after the workshop or series, and by deciding on actions, small or big, doing things differently to generate better outcomes using a skills continuum. And then lastly, learning beyond the workshop. So we all know that a learning experience is more than just a workshop together, and QLab Cymru is looking to provide some ways we can support you when you're using your new skills in your daily practice. And you'll hear about how to join the Q Cymru network, as well as an opportunity for networking with others directly after the workshop. So looking at the first part of the model of learning, we're going to spend some time to learn with and from some peers. And before we do that, there is one more question we'd like you to consider. And again, you can use Slido or pop it into the chat. Using a scale of 1 to 4, with 4 being very confident, how confident are you in doing co-creation? Also, we've got an early headliner, but it's balancing out slightly. Oh, a clear split. There are some unknowns in there, Lou. That's good elements to pick up. And we have some more coming in, slightly more confident. Well, we're looking around the scale of 2 on here. So that's really, thank you for your honesty in answering that poll. Okay, so we're going to refer now to our first segment. So this is about learning with and from peers. And I'm going to introduce some colleagues, Rebecca Hamner, Kerry Higgins and Vicky Hughes, who will share key learnings and themes emerging from their work and how co-creation was an integral approach to their work. So I'm going to hand over to Rebecca.
Thank you, Dom, and thank you all for your time today. So I'd like to introduce some of the members of the Back to Community Life group, and I don't know who's on the call today. So my name is Rebecca Hanna. I work in Improvement Cymru, and I'd like to introduce Kerry.
Put it down, Kerry Higgins, Kira, representative on the Back to Community Life project. Thank you.
Vicky.
I'm Vicky. I work for RCT Council, RCT Together. I'm the community coordinator, and I was one of the other persons that helped with the project of Back to Community Life.
Thanks, Vicky. And I don't know if Helen is on the call. Is Helen being able to make the call? No. Okay, well, that's great. So there's 3 of us on the call today. So just a little bit of background of the project. So at the beginning of the pandemic, many of our community resources were pulled back into the general hospitals to support basic care needs. So this left a gap in some of our local community services. In response to this, Improvement Cymru set up the COVID-19 Community Partnership Meeting to provide an opportunity for all sectors working in the community in Wales to come together to explore and understand the current situation, and from this put into action initiatives to enable and support vulnerable people. So within these meetings, we tried to understand the situation was in the community. We heard about the themes coming from the call lines, and that's Age Cymru, Call Line, and the Alzheimer's Society, along with listening to the different sectors' experiences. So from this intelligence and from the different sectors and from all these calls, people told us that they were becoming deconditioned, losing both physical and cognitive skills and abilities. People also told us they were frightened and very anxious about getting back to community life. And so the Back to Community Life initiative was developed. The focus area where we hope to learn from through rapid improvement was the Mountain Ash area. So as some of our members have been unable to make the call today, we've pre-recorded a short clip for you, and see if possible, would it be possible we could play that now? Thank you. Mountain Ash, Getting Back to Community Life Project, Community Co-Creation, presented by Rebecca Hanmer at Improvement Cymru,
Kerry Higgins, unpaid carer on the project.
Zoe Williams, occupational therapist, Cwmtaf. Morgannwg University Health Board.
Helen Davis, volunteer manager, Age Connect, Morgannwg.
Our Back to Community Life project brings organisations, local services, local businesses and local people together to strengthen and enable recovery-focused community environments. It's about a community response to enable, co-create and support vulnerable people to leave their homes and take the steps back into the community life. The project aims includes the following: identify the vulnerable people living in the community by agencies sharing data. Ensure the vulnerable people identified have the offer of a support where needed. Define the different levels and types of care and advice and support provided by the local community, voluntary, public, primary and secondary care services. Develop and co-create resources that enables and empowers the person to prepare and take those first steps at the right time, in the right way, and at the right level of support, physical and digital resources. Develop community-based initiatives and interventions to support, enable and empower the person and leaving no one behind. Over to you, Kerry.
Community response, co-create instead of develop. How did the project achieve this, and what did that involve? Through community engagement and a whole systems approach, we worked in partnership with organisations, local authorities, health and emergency services, and importantly, community groups and local residents. Working together, continuing to grow as we identified and welcomed new members, co-produced ideas leading to new developments, developing a set of community resources and interventions to support individuals who previously may or may not have been identified. Community engagement has achieved a shared understanding of community life through the pandemic and strengthened relationships in a unified way. New ways of working and knowledge sharing and a whole systems community response has ensured that no one is left behind. Through engaging with local people, using local information and shared intelligence from local services, this project has identified itself that one that can be adapted in other communities and contexts, a real solution to community recovery and re-engagement. Working with all sectors of the community has provided an understanding of the populations that this project may benefit. By multi-agency working, we have been able to identify the individuals to connect with. The project raises awareness, provides continuation, evidence that regional and local can work together, will fit all remits when we are looking for ideas that fit our communities, and open doors for this to work across organisations and locations. Over to Zoe, please.
Following our vision to support the individual with kindness and understanding, with an ethos of the community around the person, we developed quite rapidly as a group, collaborating in the creation of practical solutions and resources to support us in our journey. With the sharing and development of co-created ideas and their application, then allowing us to be accessible and responsive where and how our community had identified we needed to. Most importantly, consisting of local people with local knowledge, which enables feedback and application to the locality throughout this journey. For example, creating or adapting current volunteer roles, other volunteer roles for mapping in the town or facilities, and supporting community engagements, such as befriending support opportunities for our local residents, local resilience hubs with volunteers in places where advice on much needed facilities are available, exploring what local organisations would be open to. Next slide, please. As already shown as a collective and evolving group, the concept has developed. Within the formalising of projects, many tools and resources we have designed and developed, each of them could be quickly and easily replicated by other towns and other communities, including translations and alternative and accessible information formats such as easy read. For example, as you can see in the pictures above, there is a how-to guide to support other communities to consider the application. There are amendable templates such as posters and leaflets, and a practical at-home guide and self-evaluation guide. The recruitment of volunteers and some job descriptions. Next slide, please. We have letters to shopkeepers, safe recovery friendly spaces, as you can see in the centre of this slide. It shows that the consideration that we know people can find it difficult in re-engaging, and we were identifying places that can be classed as welcome spaces, a friendly face or ear that's available to help, a place to sit or wait if having difficulties or feeling overwhelmed. These recovery-friendly signs and leaflets inform people in our community what spaces are available and where these are, along with tips for people on returning home, as you can see that's positioned next. These are available across most premises now in our town and offer an opt-in and opt-out basis by using the sign. Next slide, please. Our driver diagram can be shared with yourself. It shows our journey and how this can be replicated and moulded to other areas. Most importantly, how many of our resources and tools support the development of the delivery and buy-in of key people in your application, in your setting, in your community. Next slide. We have all experienced individual and collective changes during this lockdown and other lockdowns and unlock-ins, and the impact of this on our own well-being, our personal responses, and the management or adaptation to these during these periods. As you will see throughout our presentation, What we have created has been shaped very much by all persons working in partnership and sharing their own and others' experiences as we progress through. This is true co-production throughout our development of all tools and materials. This example above is but one of our resource tools, which has been developed and evaluated by people in our community. In the creation of this guide, the technical information was informed by the professional knowledge of the physiotherapist and occupational therapist in the group. But the booklet was taken to local residents who had been shielding to ask for their opinions. From this evaluation, we made the necessary changes as part of a PDSA cycle, testing, discussing, and adding or adapting with the information from all involved. The community were key in shaping the deliverable language alongside the content and materials and designs of our project works. Everybody was an expert in our co-creation. We are now currently distributing this practical guide to people in our town. This is an example, sorry Kerry, this is an example that Kerry will give you of how to implement this in the community. Over to you, Kerry.
Thank you, Zoe. The guide aims to guide communities on how to get started within the project. The how-to guide can support any community to connect, cultivate relationships, co-create, implement and adapt to meet the needs of its residents by exploring and understanding a community's resources and assists and coordinating response from organisations, services and local businesses. Next slide, please. The process of evaluation for this project is ongoing as the project is currently active. For those interested in the evaluation of the project, please contact us and we will share that with you. There are some quotes from residents on how they have benefited from the co-created approach and resources to date. You can read the quotes yourself. And over to Helen, next slide.
These are some of the quotes from members on how they see the project so far, and you can also read these for yourself. So one of the members stated, the group had a focus on community togetherness, and through this group, many more communities will benefit. A fantastic achievement. Nicola Lewis from Cwmtaff Morgannwg University Health Board said, it is reassuring to know that there is a group of professionals working together to ensure that when restrictions are lifted, life can get back to normal. Alison Johnston of the Welsh Ambulance Service said, this project has really brought different organisations together to help and support more vulnerable people in our communities. And Mrs. Higgins said, it was a good service to be involved in the community again with such isolation. Developing this project has been empowering. Thank you. Here sums up the learning shared by the members of the group from being part of the group and co-creating and producing materials. They come up with such wonderful words: collaborative, belonging, rewarding.
Next slide, please. Thank you. Welcome to the Back to Community Life Padlet, a place for finding and sharing the learning, progress, information, guidance, presentations, and numerous other useful resources developed for the project. The Padlet has been co-created to support implementation across our Welsh communities. These are all of our learnings and useful materials to allow the concept to be easily used and adapted by others with their individual community information. We encourage you to explore how this has been embedded in the town, supporting further introductions across our towns and villages to support their own areas and populations. Sustainability is only possible through partnership and communication and collaboration. Final slide, please. On our final screen, we would like to share a small selection of the numerous members working in partnership within the project. We are also sharing on the left a wonderful view of Mountain Ash in thanks to the community, local businesses, services and organisations for being so enthusiastic and supportive of the project. We are delighted to have shared our co-creative journey with you. The project has brought together organisations and services at national, regional and local levels, has worked seamlessly, creating new ways of working together. Co-creating can make a difference, not just in Mountain Ash, but across the borough and other areas of Wales. Thank you for listening. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Rebecca and Vicky and Kerry. That's a really powerful example of co-creation. Thank you for sharing that with us today. And before I open up to the rest of the group for any reflections or comments that they want to make, I wonder if just got a couple of questions. If I can start with you, Vicky, what does co-creation actually mean to you?
Co-creation for me is when you have lots of different partners, organisations and community members. You're invited to come together to work on a project. From this, we share ideas. Everybody is valuable within the group, and it is just to develop a new project or a process with everyone involved, and it's just a better way.
Brilliant. Thanks, Vicky. Kerry, if I could come to you now, why does co-creation matter to you?
Thank you. I'm going to respond from thinking about my colleague Zoe Williams, who couldn't be with us today, who's an occupational therapist, who was an integral member of the group. And from her perspective, co-creation is so important because within her remit as an occupational therapist, it's life enabling. It's about supporting people following adversity, trauma, or even health conditions to being able to live, to meet those needs. And I think that's really important. It's about knowing as a professional that you're actually making a difference to somebody's life, and you can't possibly do that without having an element of co-creation, because it's co-creation of needs and acknowledging those.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Kerry. And if I could stick with you, in your opinion, how could it be even better? How could we make co-creation even better?
I think that for me, as an unpaid carer, the first thing I would say is don't be afraid of it. That we are all experts in our own fields, and when we are supporting people, with lived experience, that actually we are expert in our own lives. And co-creation is about a journey together. It's for me, it's the sort of verbal rubber that rubs up the them and us. It rids of the fences between us. So it's about acknowledging people's needs, acknowledging also staff and professional needs, and actually realizing that we have the same goals, and how wonderful is it to achieve them together.
Thanks, Kerry. That's really powerful, especially as you say, don't be afraid. So there's a link to find out more about the team's work being posted in the chat shortly. And I just want to open up to the rest of us now to provide some reflections on what you've just heard. So we can either do this via the chat. I think we've got Slido as well available for this element. Or if people would like to, and it'd be great to start hearing from people's voices out there that are attending as well and have joined us today. Open your microphones as well if you'd like to. So what stands out from you reflecting on what you've just heard? And please just pull yourself off mute and start speaking up if you want to chip in.
Yeah, I'd just like to say something for me. I just think the enthusiasm and passion that came across from each of the speakers, and just how when you actually ask questions about how they feel about co-creating and how well it worked for them, But I would like to ask a question as well, is what would you say is the biggest kind of stumbling blocks or difficulty with co-creation, or did you experience any of these things while you were actually looking at this piece?
Thanks, Mark. Who would like to talk about the biggest stumbling blocks or challenges?
Should I come in here? Can you hear me?
Thanks,
Yeah.
Rebecca.
Okay, no problem. So I think some of the biggest, probably the biggest blocks, stumbling blocks, was probably creating the time. So we had very frequent meetings, creating the time for everybody to contribute, I think was the biggest blocks. As we know, time is a big issue for everybody, but everyone has different roles, within the community, everyone had different pressures and priorities. So it's really making sure we have that time, but also providing people with other opportunities apart from that meeting space to also help and contribute towards that. For example, I know Zoe in the presentation talked about the practical guide, and that was taken out to people who were currently shielding to help us shape that. So it's creating other opportunities alongside that meeting time. I think, yeah, was creating those spaces. Thank you.
It's great.
Thanks, Rebecca. There's a couple of other questions in the chat as well about any top tips about breaking down hierarchy.
Oh, that's a great question. Who's that from? Oh, Natalie Robinson. Thank you, Natalie. Great question. Top tips of breaking. Oh, it's about giving everybody a voice, isn't it? Has anyone else on the call got some top tips around that? So that would be really interesting to find out. So please pop those into the chat. But it's really about giving people a voice, making sure that everyone has fair and equal opportunity to contribute to that. And also everyone is equal, isn't it? So starting off with those values and those principles from the very start. But if anyone else has got some top tips, we'd love to hear and learn from those. Thank you, Dom.
And can I just add into that when you are looking at something wearing, let's say, your professional hat, just remember that you are a citizen too, and you have a vested interest in your health needs or your social needs in your own area of your life. So we are actually all the same person, just wearing different hats. So it's about good old-fashioned conversations and actually recognizing that there's an element of legality about the need for co-creation and co-production. And we seem to forget that. We seem to think that it's the extra Kit Kat in the picnic box. It isn't. It is the picnic box. And every time we open it and we delve in, we have to acknowledge that it's part of our tools, our resources, but we consider it as an extra on the side. So it's the way we think about it, really. Sorry to bring chocolate into that, but it's a necessity, isn't it?
It always is, Kay. Thank you for that. And there are some questions there about how did you get a broadest range? You know, we always worry, have we got everybody involved? How much further how do we make sure we've got that community? And a question about the schools as well, Rebecca. I don't know if you want to quickly answer those and then we'll move on.
Yeah, sure. I can't see the ones about the schools, but in terms of having that broad range of people involved, it's always having that open door, always seeking out and find it and offering that opportunity, perhaps making an active offer to people who perhaps may not be able to participate in those kind of formal meetings that we held. But yeah, it's seeking that out and always having that open door. And always
so it's a continual process then, Rebecca. It wasn't these are the people in the room and now we go ahead. It's just continuing and expanding. Yeah, brilliant.
Absolutely. Okay.
Thanks very much. I think there's loads. I think we could spend another hour just with you guys discussing because it's such a powerful project. We're going to spend some time now moving into taking it into learning by doing. So I'm just going to hand over shortly into my colleague Mandy, but this is where we'll be leading into breakout sessions and discussing and reflecting on our learning together. So I'm going to hand over to Mandy now.
Right, thanks, Dom. Yes, as Dom said, we're now going to go into breakout rooms. So I'm just going to give you some information of how that will happen within the room. Within the room, we'll be using a structure that begins by looking at what the goal of our work is, which is to co-create. And the definition that we work with is identifying who's connected with an issue through experience or expertise, and then from that, building solutions with them from start to finish. Our activity when we're in the breakout room is to take this goal, the intended outcome, and then to create an anti-goal, an unwanted outcome. So if our our goal, we're going to flip it around. So our anti-goal to co-creation is this: how can we make sure that we achieve the worst result imaginable with respect to co-creation in our work? To do this, we're going to go through sequences of steps within the structure. And when you get into your breakout room, you'll see this. You'll see these 3 lists that we're going to engage with. Within list 1, the idea is to compile a list of to-dos to achieve the anti-goal. You will add sticky notes for anything that you can do to make sure that you achieve this most unwanted of results, and think about how you can ensure the worst possible outcome. And I encourage you to be wild about this, to put any ideas down that you think. And you will have 10 minutes looking at that, creating some sticky notes with discussions with your colleagues. Then on list 2, you'll add sticky notes here for anything that you are currently doing or that perhaps your team is doing that resembles anything on list 1. And we would encourage you to be honest within that as well. I think there was a comment earlier on that said, we think we're doing this, but are we? And this is the place to actually consider that. And then the activity then ends with the list 3, and your final list then is to identify actions or next steps to dampen or stop this behaviour happening. And we need to think about what first steps will help us stop this unwanted behaviour. So here, for each item on list 2, take that and add a sticky note for something you can stop doing today. You have 10 minutes to do that. And the idea here is to identify doing something new or is not to identify doing something new or additional. It's to make sure your suggestions are about stopping activities and behaviours, not about starting new things. So how we work together in the room is via this format. Feedback from given to us in workshops too mentioned that some of us would like and welcome using different tools such as online whiteboards to record the contributions. So this in this breakout room, we're going to use Jamboard, which might be new for some of us, but it is very easy to use. There's a number of tools available on Jamboard. As you can see, there's a pen tool, there's a text tool, but the one we're just going to use today is the sticky note, as you can see on this slide. And it's quite simple to use. You just you go to the sidebar there on the left, pick up a sticky note, and then it gives you a choice of some colours. You pick your colour, any colour that you want, and then you start typing in the box there, and then you just do a save, and that will take it onto the list for you. What I would encourage everybody to do is that when you're creating your sticky notes, to be precise as you can, thinking about the what, the who, the where, the why, the when, and the how as well, so that your sticky note is rich with detail. And also, it's just to say, it's not just about sticky notes. It's not about creating these in silence or isolations. And really, to have the best experience in the room, we ask you to use your mics and video and use lots of open and honest discussion as well.
How do we now move into learning for action? And this is about how we stimulate, inspire us to do new things in new ways. We're looking at deciding on those big actions, small or big, of doing things differently to generate better outcomes and creating an impact by formulating as actionable goals how we're going to act after the workshop and using a skills continuum. So I'm going to hand over to Mandy, who is going to take us through the self-reflection tools that we're going to use this afternoon.
Thanks, Dom. Yes, from feedback, we know that you value the time and space for reflection. I'm not going to be able to perhaps give as much time as we wanted to, because time has slipped a little through the fabulous discussions that we're having. So just in this part of the learning interaction, I'm just going to introduce you to the tools, and then you'll have these tools with you that you can use after the workshop as well. So what we do, we're going to look at a continuum that was created by Nesta that looks specifically at 3 aspects of co-creation. The first aspect that they came up with is how to approach challenges and situations. And as we've already discussed, perhaps we don't do this all of the time in every situation. So it poses some questions. Do we approach situations and challenges by looking at those usual suspects? Or do we actually see the people that are affected by an issue and spending the time with them as well? So that's one of the aspects that we can consider of where we fit as practitioners, and often the reality is somewhere in between, and we all recognise that there's always room for this skill to be developed as it becomes the default behaviour for us as improvers. And then the next area that was in the Nesta continuum is how we make decisions. Do we do it by using stats and data and based on assumptions and stuff that we've already done? Or do we challenge those assumptions? And again, within this continuum, we probably work at different levels at different times as well. And so again, this is a skill that can be developed in our work. And then the final aspect here is about how we interact with people, tools and systems. And do we do that with just standardized models and methods and things that we've used many times before? Or do we actually tailor activities for the people that we're working with? And again, we probably work somewhere in between that at different times. So that's one part of the tool that we have in the reflective toolkit that we're going to offer you. And then we've allied this with another model that has been developed by Rolf Freshwater and Jasper, which asks 3 simple questions: what, so what, and now what. It begins by asking us a what question: what do I do? And then we then deepen the reflection and ask ourselves, so what does that mean for us? And then we take that reflection even further to ask a now what question that considers ways of doing different things. And what we've done and we'll send this out as a document for you, is that you can go through this in your own time and actually challenge yourself to think about each of these 3 aspects of the continuum of the Nesta framework, and actually go through the process of asking ourselves a what, a so what, and a now what. And particularly interesting to note that we score ourselves around a 2 in to indicate our level of confidence within this poll. So perhaps this tool will help us to engage more precisely in how we need to develop our skills of co-creation. So I won't go through the rest of it because time isn't on our side. And I'll just to say that we've only had time just to briefly highlight this tool, but we will be sharing this tool for reflection with you via an email after the workshop.